Okay, awesome. So tonight we have a bunch of guests. I'm hoping all of my wonderful guests can come up to the front now. And I will introduce them. So this is Peter March. Peter is Director of UX at Digital Agency right now. Where are you right now? FCB Health. And he was a judge for 2 years, 2011 to 2012. This is Matt. He's our one of our advisory board members. You all know him. That's Scott over there. Scott was a 2011 winner, and he's also a UX Awards board member and managing director at Modus. In between them is Turi. She was a 2014 judge and is participatory design director at Frog. And way at the end there is Todd, who just got here off a plane from LA just for us. Thank you. So Todd is Managing Director of UX at Huge and was a 2014 speaker. Huge has won 2 awards, and he's also an advisory board member this year. And on this side, we have Paul Berry. He's CEO of Rebelmouse and former CTO at Huffington Post and 2012 judge. And I've already introduced Peter, so that's our panel. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. This is amazing. So I'm going to start with a question to kick it off, which is, what makes great UX anyway?
Yes, and the device, right? So no, but seriously, and that's one of the things you try and factor in. So actually, one of the references I was going to make is, I think it was 2011. Anyway, we had I think they got silver, firm in Jersey, small firm, but the UX solution they did, part of what made their case compelling is that they were working with a couple government sort of agencies that were slow and bureaucratic and stuck somewhere in the 1980s. And so the fact that they were able to do what they did, given the constraints, was part of the reason they got the award, right? I mean, if it was like, I don't know, IBM doing it, it's like, yeah, not so much. But like, oh my God, you had to do this and that and, you know, bribe these people and do that, like, oh, and it still worked. Like, that's amazing, right? So you try and keep context in mind. And, you know, when the Bloomberg has been a winner, and you know, I used to look at the interface, and you know, it's slick and black, but it's all numbers all the time, right? Well, that's not a child's toy, right? So if that was the criteria, they'd fail. But it's financial apps, so like, oh, the fact that it's actually readable and you can sort of work through it and do some sorting is a big deal for its context. So that's the one thing, you know, we do try and keep in mind. So that was my little point on that.
I would say that having a point of view is really important. Having a voice, matching that voice with the company. So, you know, a tiny thing for me is that Uber is an example of like how little friction we want in life. We just want to hit that thing. And now lately you put the address in, so you don't even have to talk to the Uber driver at all. Like there's literally, like, my wife and I had 3 kids in DC, and we'd just pile in the car and deal with the chaos of ourselves and get dropped off at the right place. And so I think UX should blur lines. You should care about the visuals of it. You should care about the content, etc. But really have a voice that matches.
I think in UX, you have great UX. You have the obvious part, and you have the hidden part. And you can think of it kind of like a movie. If you go to see let's say a good summer movie, you're going to see a high frame rate. You're going to see great effects. You're going to see people you know, and you're going to be able to get all of this stuff in a commercial, and it'll be interesting. It'll draw you in. But then there's the hidden part. That's really hard to communicate quickly. It's something that you get through experience, going through that process in which you want to use it, you are engaged over time. In a movie, you're going to get involved with the plot. Hopefully, you're going to get involved with the plot. A lot of movies don't do a very good job of that. They'll just be all the fancy stuff. And I think what's interesting about the awards is that they try to showcase that hidden part by saying, look, we really try to understand what the user is going to go through. We understand what they need, so that they're not thinking about what an awesome app this is, but wow, I just got to my place in like 3 minutes with my kids and it was easy, and that was so nice. Oh, that made my life so much easier. That's the hidden part of great UX.
I think I'm going to say pretty much what you guys both said in the same way, or a slightly different way, okay? But for me, great user experience is when all of the great thinking kind of gets out of the way of the enjoying of what's happening. So the great thinking, that's the work of the team. That's the process that's shown in the videos. That's all the great work that went into making it there so that it does disappear into, oh, of course it works this way. I'm getting what I need done.
Well, a lot goes into great UX, of course, but for me, the one indispensable thing is homework, and by that I mean that bag of tricks that we use when we can to do great work. That almost always involves getting to know our target audiences, whether that's through interviews or shadowing them or ethnography, whatever techniques we use. Obviously, having the time to understand the marketplace that we're operating in, understanding how an existing product or service is currently being used. These kinds of things, lead to great work. We're frequently required to cut a lot of corners. Sometimes we're required to cut all the corners in our work, and I know everybody here has experienced that. But then every now and again, we get to use the full bag of tricks, and when we do, the difference in outcome is profound. I think we've all had that experience. We know how powerful that is.
Sucks to go last. I answered the question pretty thoroughly. I guess for me, I think the beauty of UX is there's no kind of recipe for great user experience. I think sometimes it's having a great problem to solve, and sometimes that comes from the business, the clients that we work with. For example, I know we're going to talk about this later, but this just came to mind, the work that we did for HBO Go back in, I think, 2012 or 2013. Like, that was pretty revolutionary for HBO Go to take a stance to say, we want to make our content available via digital. So to have the opportunity to solve that problem in the first place is pretty amazing. For me, it's all about outcomes. It's all about, does this experience change my life? I've seen a lot of examples where we do the hard work, and or companies will do the hard work, and the outcome or the actual design, the artifacts, the design isn't great. And I think for me, it's more of an art than a science, and I think it's a combination of all that stuff that eventually, ladders up to something that changes people's lives.
Cool. So since you got the mic, why don't you talk about what you emphasize in UX in your own work?
Ooh. All right, cut me off. I think, we talk about all these different activities and things that we do, they're great. They're really helpful activities. For me, I emphasize in my work and with the teams that I work with is having those activities come natural. It's using your instinct and intuition in collaboration with these methodical kind of processes that we use. Also emphasize being fearless about design in the true kind of spirit of agile, capital A, lowercase a, agility, just being fearless about putting pen to paper and just starting to create interfaces as you're creating personas, as you're doing exercises and thinking about scenarios, what have you, to learn from those designs and put them in front of users. I don't think that, for me, it's a very nonlinear process. And one thing that I always say with my teams is never let innovation be inconvenient. Sometimes the whole process is driven so much through client services that you reach a point where you're like 3/4 of the way through and you're like, holy shit, we have this awesome idea. And then everybody's terrified to tell the client about it because, oh my God, it's going to add time, it's going to do this or that. But if everybody kind of links arms and says, wait a second, this is the right thing to do for the design, it's the right thing to do for the business and the users, then that's what I really, pride myself sort of in fighting for. Are we going this way?
Yes.
So Beverly, the question is, which aspects of UX do we tend to stress?
Yeah, what does UX mean for you and the work that you do?
Oh, that's a big question as well. I'm going to take a stab at one thing that's kind of top of mind for us lately, and that's, it's to do more with less and less, because the constraints we're seeing now is everybody is so busy, and none of us can even get out of bed in the morning without some kind of alert or reminder or email, and we're just kind of following those around through the day. And that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but that's our reality. And so as we're designing now, we're trying to almost make user experience go away more and more. Or, the best, as we say, we do a lot of, the project that won our UX award in 2011 was an employee intranet project. And, we like to say increasingly the best intranet is when you never have to log into, because, companies are always trying to get more employees to log into their intranet. But we're saying, no, bring it to them instead and only give them the information they absolutely need to have. Everything's coming down to one button. Everything's coming down to, people increasingly want you to do the thinking for them. And if they trust you, they'll let you do it, because we're just so busy. So for me, that's what's dominating our thinking these days, is how do we design experiences that strip away everything and do our thinking for us and make things simple and lead us through the nose through the day, because it's helpful.
So what's important to me in user experience? Where I come from sort of in my career path, my background is very much in design research. I'm an anthropologist by original training. So as I look at what I've focused on in user experience over 10 or 15 years, it's began very much focused on understanding the user, what they need, what their context is, and then working with the design team to figure out how we translate that. But what's really interesting to me over the past 5 years or so is realizing as a designer invested in these insights and these products, that deep disappointment that you get when this beautiful idea goes out there, it doesn't have the advocate to fight for it, or it doesn't have a fertile ground in the client organization I'm in an agency, to take it on and make that come to life within their organization. So I would say that for me, user experience today is very much design of me understanding the users, of course my team, but also increasingly doing research and helping my client build their capabilities, tools, and skills to be able to take on a product, a design, or a concept and keep it alive through those iterations that we know are going to continue with a user experience. A user experience is never a moment in time, and if your client isn't able to keep the next moment and the next moment beautiful, your user experience will die.
So what I like about UX, what I think is important to UX, what I like about UX, whatever I feel like talking about, it's my Meetup, folks. Welcome to it. So what I like to work on, I guess I like, and what I find important, I like, in this part of my career, I would say I really like taking things that have typically been hard for people to understand, or obscure, impossible for people to penetrate, and make it dirt simple for them to get into it. So I work at a visualization data analytics company, and that's typically stuff that specialists at a company will have access to. To me, to make that simple enough so that I can show it to my 10-year-old daughter and she can get it, that's really cool. I get a big kick out of that. I also really enjoy pushing the envelope in terms of how technology works. So I like understanding how people are making sense of the ideas behind all this data, how they're thinking about it, how I can present it in a way that makes sense to them. But I also like seeing how we can push the boundaries in terms of how we represent it, so that it's in a way that they can really grapple with it. All right, thanks.
Yeah. I come at this very much from startup, not agency world, and I think that Palo Alto Software, and then Avaz, and then HuffPost, and with Rebelmouse, it's a little bit of a mix because we're launching properties for clients, but I very much hate the campaign-driven world where and this is a lot of agency world, you get to launch, and then everyone says we're going to stick with it, but they really just get drinks and walk away. So from my side, when you are in the startup and you are building this thing, perfect is the enemy of the good, completely. You have to. I try to force everyone to think: is it better? Because you're iterating. You're like rebuilding a plane while it's in flight. So is this better than what we had in the morning? Then get it out there and figure out a space to test 50-50. See if people are liking it. And I'd say that there's a general distrust in what users will tell you. I have a terrified perception of the random people you would get in a focus group to come on a Wednesday at 3 p.m. for free what? And then influence everything. So that is like the most terrifying thing that can happen to our process at HuffPost, at Rebelmouse. The best thing is to get out there in data and start playing with things and then see, oh, look, people are staying way longer now. Or, oh, they're doing this. They're clicking the extra click. So that's my...
All right, so I'm going to riff off some of the stuff that's already been said. I'm in an agency, sorry, but so that, you know, and that's certainly in this city, that's how a lot of us roll. So I got to say, I'm happy to observe that, like, there's less about, like, do we need UX at all? Like, that's kind of done. We get invited to most of the meetings we're supposed to be invited to, and early enough to make a difference. But the last mile, 2 last miles, the one that's been around for a while is still like, actually go outside and validate this stuff, right? Data's great, right? But some of it is you're not going to catch because it's an expression, or they mention that the reason I'm only using this at 3 is because I have children, which we didn't catch, right? Things like that. So that still matters, right? And so as best you can, and you know, times are tight and money is not always as free-flowing as it should be. Try and find some grounding with real people who accurately represent your targets, and see what that gives you. Because you'd be amazed what you find. And I still have to beat that drum. It's like, okay, this is a good project plan. You've given me more than 3 hours for 20 wireframes. That's an improvement. But now where's the 2 weeks for testing? You know, let's have a conversation about that. Do you want to?
I think that I just realized. So in my world with the startup stuff, you still do want people to talk to test it. You just don't want them to be the random weirdos that show up to focus groups. You want to find the people who are using it. So at HuffPost there was a group of editors, and that they were like, yes, this is better, I'm faster, that data helped. And then commenters, like I talked a lot with Peace Kitten. I don't know who she is still, but like I talked a lot with her.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of websites targeted at doctors, and so part of it is like, if you eat your own dog food here, like, you suck it up and you do a 7 a.m. interview because they have patients at 8. So you're like, okay. I'll see you at the testing room at 7 a.m. and then 6 or 8 or whatever, because that's when they're done, right? So if you're going to go in, then you got to go in when they can talk to you, right? So that's part of it. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, you know, as the world is getting more complicated and multi-platform, and the mentioned service design, like trying to look at that too, like, okay, there's the context of this is a website compared to other websites they might have seen. That's one level of context, but then you sort of need to pull the aperture back and say, okay, what shopping places have they seen? What other signage will they have seen? You know, what is their day like? You know, outside of what the app itself might do. When are they using the app? Is it at night? Is it during the day? Does that affect maybe the colors you choose? Because if it's mostly at night, maybe you want something that really looks good on a lit screen as opposed to all black, right? That kind of stuff, that kind of context, I think that's going to become more and more important, because we're now in a world where people may never make it to your website, right? The whole experience could be the app plus the help desk call. Okay? Well, what? I mean, splashy full bleed images now. Well, they're useless now because they're not going to see them. So what's that conversation, right? So that's where I sort of see the world sort of going, and it's going to involve, I think, possibly and actually some quite interesting UX challenges, right? Definitely we're going to have to go outside. More ethnographic research, more observational research, more, you know, follow the user around and see what they do, and the last sort of pull on a couple Forrester reports, do your work, and never leave your desk.
Thank you. So now I wanted to ask the 3 judges on the panel specifically, what they looked for when they were evaluating submissions.
So not surprisingly, for somebody who comes from a user research background, I was very interested in understanding or in hearing, did they do user research? What did they get out of it? And were they able to translate the insights that they expressed from the user research into something meaningful in the design? So that, for me, was one of my leading criteria.
In my group, we had this tremendous disparity between, like, it was like Google submitted Android. It's like, what? Like and then HBO Go, I think, was in that group, and that was tremendous. And then there were like small groups of people who had done really significant work, and it's like, well, but you didn't build Android. And so I really struggled with that. I do have advice that there's so many submissions that a crisp video does help sort of like, oh, that's what you were, and one
Totally
that sort of shows, you know, and one that shows the actual UX thought, because the bad videos, here's the product and here's why it's good. The good video is, this is the UX stuff that went into making this product good, and just in the mess of all the entries, that really helps you as a judge. And then I'd say focus on the empathy. If there were only 4 of you, say we might not have built Android, but 4 of us got together and did this, and I think that'll create the right mood for the judges.
Yeah, I look for an original thought, and I did try and keep the admonishment in mind that, you know, they had to show their work, right? So if I couldn't figure out how they got there, they got dinged. Because, you know, as I think you talked about earlier, like, we have the Webbies already, right? We have Conline and all that stuff. Like, Glitz is nailed. We don't have to, you know, do that kind of award, but we do need to have some recognition for good work, good process, good execution, and good user empathy. So I tried to sort of make sure I sort of favored the entries that really, you know, went at it the proper way and came up with some good results.
A smaller point is maybe what I was not looking for. As I went through the long list of entries, I am somebody who tends to leave things to the last minute, so I did it in the night before we met for judging and a couple hours before I went down there. So I was fairly ruthless on those that didn't submit certain of the key things that they were supposed to submit. Just kind of was like, okay, on to the next one. So to the point you made earlier, completion and sort of answering the requirements is important.
Right, I think you have to really make it crystal clear, why did you deserve a UX award specifically versus some other random award. So now I'm going to ask the winners. We've got 3 winners on the panel, including Scott. Well, Karen actually was here earlier, but she disappeared, so I don't know what happened to her. But so she won't be able to speak, but Scott and Todd can speak about their submissions. And Scott had a submission in 2011. You want to talk about that?
Sure, and Karen had a good excuse. She had to call Australia, she told me. Yeah, you know, some people like to say that if they applied to their college today, they wouldn't get in. And I'm quite sure that if my agency entered the work that we entered in 2011 into today's UX Awards, we wouldn't get in. You know, this event has gotten bigger and better and more competitive, and the work has gotten so much better, and we didn't invent Android. So, you know, I was pleased that we were able to be successful early on. But certainly, I think first and foremost, we followed the instructions. To Beverly's point, she shared the instruction manual with us today. We took that to heart, and that really narrowed down the list. I think if any of us look back over the last 12 months at our portfolio of project work, we're going to think, okay, what did we do that was especially transformative, especially innovative, made a real demonstrable impact on our client's organization? That's going to really narrow down the list to probably 1, 2 things. Frankly, we have years where we probably wouldn't think we did anything that qualifies, because so much of the work we do is incremental, and while it does make an impact, it's not as sexy. It's not the big bang impact that you might want to enter into an event like this. What else? Can we put together a good story? So, the year that we entered 2 actually. We felt pretty excited about 2 of our projects, and then we thought to ourselves, did we do the homework in those cases where we can tell the story? Did we have that user insight that we could tie back to the design decisions we made, and then tie that to an outcome that was measurable and profound? And so again, we were lucky to have a couple of projects where that was the case, and then of course then we had a lot of packaging to do. And it's a lot of work, and my agency it's medium sized today. It was smaller at the time, limited resources. We had to really go out of our way to do the work to make the entry. Of course, it was well worth it.
I can't talk exactly about what went into creating the submission, but I can talk about what went into both projects. I think we're talking about HBO Go and American Express. HBO Go, they were very different for us. So for a huge, we don't have the same process that we apply to every project, and this is a good example. For HBO Go, it's a pretty obvious design challenge, and one that was very close to all of our hearts. We're all massive consumers of HBO's content. So for us, there was an obvious starting place for us. It's not to say that we didn't incorporate users into the process. As we went on, we didn't iterate, and we didn't use some of incorporate all of the activities. But to start was a no-brainer. For American Express, we actually started with user research. We wanted to talk to real people that are American Express cardholders, members. American Express was all about member acquisition through digital channel. So it was, a lot of the research was hearing from members talk about why are you a member? And they all had these amazing stories about moments where American Express was there for them and helped them. Either they used their points to redeem to get a plane ticket, or they were stuck in some third world country and American Express helped them out. So for us, it was that user insight really led to the kind of vision, which really was that kind of at the core of the user experience. That was what everything else kind of hung on. I think for HBO Go, we settled on this notion of, for users entering the experience, you essentially enter at the category page. And one of the observations was, for most on-demand video experiences, it's a lot of work. You have to go in and you have to go through a finding structure and you have to select what you're like browsing constantly. And what we ended up on was just take all of the shows, put them on the page, and select one, and it will link you to the most recent episode, because most people are probably watching what's new or what's most recent. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much. They're very different projects, but I think a large part of what needed to happen to submit both of those projects was to tell a story, about the journey that we all went through and the epiphanies that we had, both user epiphanies and internal design process iteration epiphanies that led us to the final design decisions.
Awesome. So this is Karen. Karen is also a winner for project when she was at LBI, and you arrived just in time to talk about what went into your winning submission.
Thanks. Sorry for being Jane come lately to this. Basically, I worked on a site called Americans Elect, and sort of, it was a startup that is now unfortunately defunct, but the point is it wanted to be a new way to elect a presidential candidate. This was for the 2012 elections, to create sort of a groundswell of public support and opinion about who, basically a new way to create a candidate for President of the United States. And this was through a combination of basically bank level security that went into it. It was almost like a dating site in the sense that basically you would come to the site, you would take some polls and quizzes, and it would sort of match you with the candidates that were most appropriate for your political leanings, and basically encompass all of this functionality that would turn it into a winning candidate. So what went into our winning submission, I think, was basically we did a video that we had that was talking about the various people who worked on the project and the sort of political zeitgeist that would spawn such a project. we discussed a lot about the design. We were very clear about the process and the project roadmap, and I think that it was not just the site itself, but actually our ability to have sort of storytelling, the way we compiled the information about the project, so that you could see that, like, and showing a lot of examples of the work that went into it. So we're really into like sort of photo essays. So we photographed every sort of session or thing that we did, and even the deliverables that we did. We're really big on working on the walls, posting our work, iterating on that work. So really showing that kind of agile process, photographing it, and sort of creating the story around it to submit sort of the birth to the end, the creation of this idea sort of to the birthing of actually the website itself. So I think that's what our submission was really about, in capturing that sort of story and the political excitement around that.
Awesome. So we are at 8:30, but I definitely want to do some open Q&A. So Ryan, would you be willing to be a runner with the mic? And I made an error when saying that there was only one person who was here last year. Actually, Ryan was an amazing volunteer and helped out a lot this last year. He's one of our key volunteers.
Hey guys. Okay, so I'm just wondering if you had any advice or recommendations in terms of from a, just getting started in this the UX, space and industry. Any books or blogs or podcasts or just anything that you would recommend that we could sort of look at as good examples to become more fully immersed and familiar with getting things going in the proper direction to begin with.
I would just say one thing, and I'll pass along. Like Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics is sort of old school, but it's a really great example of ways to think visually.
So there's some. There's several books out there. If you find me afterwards, I can send you the list. Lou Rosenfeld, who runs Rosenfeld Media, his publishing house is actually based in Brooklyn, so go local. He's got several good books on experience design, designing interfaces, doing user research. He's now got a book on service design. He's got a new one coming out, or it's now out, on like managing chaos in project situations. So can't say enough about him. Also a good supporter of the UX community. So I'd love to give a shout out to him. A List Apart, which is a website with lots of articles on web development, has a sister company that's a publishing arm called A Book Apart, abookapart.com, and they have a lot of good short reads, content strategy, how to be your own designer and not get screwed by your clients, responsive design, a couple books on responsive design, and then they're sort of fleshing out from there. So it's a quick read. If I remember correctly, the point of the books was it had to be short enough so you could get on the plane to New York. By the time you get to San Francisco, you were done with the book. So easy peasy. Those are both good ones. Christina Woodkey's book on blueprints for the web does a nice job of sort of laying out, here are the UX tools of the trade, here's why they're good, here's what to use them for, and then you sort of mix and match depending on the project. That's a nice one. Dan Saffer's got a good book on gesture design, if you're interested in that sort of stuff. He's also got one on interaction design, which is nice. And the Scott McCloud book also. So again, if you want more, come see me later.
Thank you.
Sounds like Peter has a lot to say on this topic. Very quick, because we need to get...
Okay. By Steve Krug, Rocket Surgery Made Easy. He's got another one called Don't Make Me Think, but the rocket surgery one's better. And there is this free book from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services called Research-Based Web Design Guidelines, something obscure like that. It's from 2006. It has nothing on modern about mobile, but it's the best resource around anywhere that kind of brings together all the research anywhere. Everything's perfectly cited. It's incredibly easy to read too, and it's free. Your taxes paid for it already.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, so we're going to take two more questions. Anyone?
Thanks. For those of you that work with larger enterprise clients that might not buy into all of the UX processes, specifically user research and testing, how do you negotiate that and argue the validity of doing these things with your clients?
Does one of the agencies on this side want to answer that?
I can say that it varies. Part of it is getting to know your client organization a little bit, to understanding what resonates with them. So there's several ways I've approached that. One of which is bringing the client or their stakeholder out with me into the field. The great success there is when you're in your final presentation talking about the user experience, they stand up and they say, I talked to this person, I understand where she's coming from, that's why we need to change. In the particular case I'm thinking of some insurance policies. But it was really compelling to the rest of the executive team that somebody in their team stood up and said he'd learned something from the field. So that created buy-in for the next project. So that kind of pilot to build a process can be very effective. You're building advocates. The other thing that we're increasingly seeing, because more and more often we're finding that we're being asked to do work for in-house user experience teams, we're often asked to help them understand what is the business value of user experience and prepare for them a story that they can take up the chain or across the organization. So doing some of that, sometimes it's desk research also, to support that other people are investing in user experience, user research, things like that is a complement. So if I put those two together, I guess it's attacking it from the very qualitative, very human side, as well as the dollar speak side.
Just a couple quick things to add. Yeah, nothing converts people like actually witnessing research in action. It's miraculous to see. Once someone's actually watched it, seen it, they're changed forever. Oops, sorry, thought that was off. They're just changed forever. And if you ever do get to do a small research project within a client organization, by all means invite everybody you can in that client organization to participate. Twist arms, buy them lunch, whatever it takes, because it will change them. But I just would also add, this is really changing amazingly. 10 years ago, it was such an uphill battle to sell research. And you were just, even if you got to do it every once in a while, you patted yourself on the back. And now, people are calling us, and I'm sure, I know that Troy's seeing this as well, and asking for it. We're in competitive situations where if our competitors are not recommending it, it's reflecting upon them negatively. The world has changed dramatically. We're doing research in probably more than half of our projects now, and I suspect that trend will continue.
One trick, and this might be giving too many of our trade secrets away, but sometimes we'll do user research for the actual pitch, just so when we go in, we can tell a story and show the value of it as kind of a formative, how it formed our thinking and how we're responding to the pitch. So out of the gate, the client knows what they're getting involved with, and quite frankly, like for some of these large enterprise-wide organizations or projects, if they're not willing to embrace that aspect of user experience, maybe they're not the best client to work with. If your organization is in a position where they can be picky, sometimes you can just say no.
Don't ask permission, just do it. And do it really quick, as cheap as you can, and then put together the results, make it quantitative. You say like, oh, we talked to 5, we showed it to 5 people, 5 of them failed, and here's all of our results totally transparently in a 1-minute highlight video of it. And that can do wonders for you.
Awesome. We have one last question about the UX awards, ideally.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm just hoping that maybe you're all familiar with lean UX practices, and do you guys ever, kind of to piggyback off that, do you guys ever bring the client in the initial stages and actually go through some of the processes with them to kind of show them how you do the roadmap, and if that ever helps kind of convince them?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm pushing my firm to start doing more of is called the service blueprint, which is sort of borrowing a tool from the service design world. And you sort of take, it's sort of like a series of swim lanes. You sort of start with the user journey, which we're all familiar with, but then you have like, okay, who are the client characters in that journey? What are their processes? Do they need any devices built to support it? Any back-end processes? Do they ship anything? And for every step, you sort of force the client to sort of stand next to you and like walk through what it's really going to take to make this happen. And it's a real eye-opener, especially if you're dealing with a couple departments that never talk to each other on the client side, and they have to all be in the room and like, oh, I didn't realize you were going to run a TV spot then. Like, that's going to totally screw up my lunchtime. Well, aren't we glad we're here? Thank you very much, right? And it really helps them understand the complexity of what they're doing and why they need to sort of have a timeline and be realistic about their goals and metrics and stuff like that, and then all the stuff that they didn't think about that's now they have a hole to fill, like, oh, I didn't realize there was a hole, now I have to fill it, right? So it becomes a very interesting conversation. And if you do that as part of your sort of initial idea labs and ideation sessions, everyone sort of starts at a happy place as opposed to sort of slowly figuring out what the hell they're going to do 6 months later, right? So I can't speak enough of their great service blueprints, and they can be pretty powerful. You have to have some work ahead of time. You know, have an idea at least roughly what your personas are, have some user journeys that make sense. But if you can sort of come prepared with that and some of your own strategic ideas, you know, the rest of the project can go so much better.
Any quick comments from this side?
Where I was saying before that I started doing user research, and I feel like in many ways I'm learning about the client organization. Much of that is about bringing them into the process all the way throughout. So I feel like our work has become design today's product and service design is so multidisciplinary, so multifaceted, that if your client isn't part of the team designing the solution, and it's probably not going to work in their organization. So yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everyone who has come out for this, and we're going to have drinks now and mingle, and I particularly appreciate this amazing panel that came out for this meetup of past judges, winners, and the advisory board. Let's give everybody a hand. Just a reminder to put your name on the mailing list if you want to hear about the awards and come to the event. And thank you.